Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. We reached the third chapter of the book. The author, rahimahullah, says, Al-Kitab al-Thalith, Kitab al-Janaiz. The book of Janaiz, being the plural of the word janaza, or you can say jinaza with a kasra as well, meaning funerals. And much more than just funerals, Kitab al-Janaiz is much more than a funeral. One could say is a book of, or a chapter of, all rulings pertaining to death, before, during, and after. The comprehensive rulings of leaving this life, before a person actually dies and perishes, while a person is dying and perishing, and after a person has died and perished. And it's not necessarily accurate to just call janaiz funerals. Obviously, one of the most important acts of the entire process is the funeral, is the actual funeral. The washing, shrouding, praying, and the burying of the deceased Muslim, or of the deceased servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the salah is one of the most important, but there are others. There are rulings of death, rulings of approaching death, rulings of death approaching you. And there are rulings after death has already come and the soul has been taken. There are rulings upon those who are living. So Kitab al-Janaiz is much more than just a funeral. It's much more than just a funeral. A funeral process or funeral in the United States is the body has been cremated, or the body has been preserved and dressed up, and it's an open casket funeral or closed casket funeral, and the people, they come in, they sit, they cry, there's the eulogy, so on and so forth. Then there's the hearse and the procession to the graveyard, and so on and so forth. People sit around and eat, they drink, they gamble, they drink, they fornicate, whatever the case may be among the kuffar. They all call that the funeral. But it's much more than that in Islam. So one could say it's the rulings, or there are rulings that pertain to those who are sick and ill, those who are wounded, those who are about to die, supposedly. Those who have already passed away, things happen and take place. Those people who remain alive, there are responsibilities that they have with regards to the deceased person, with regards to his wealth, with regards to family, and the list goes on. And the list goes on. And there are many other side issues, or many other branches of, or not even branches, but different chapters of fiqh that also pertain to janaiz, such as al-idad, the iddah period. What's the iddah period for a woman who's a widow? What's the iddah period of a woman who's pregnant and a widow, a pregnant widow? Okay, al-ihdad was the ruling of mourning over one's dead husband. Then we have another chapter of fiqh, which is al-mawarith, inheritance, al-wasaya, wills and beseech, person's the wills. That's a part of the rulings of death. A person writes a will and then dies. Okay, we have mathalan rulings of wudu and ghusl. What's the ruling on touching the dead person and then making salah without wudu, or carrying the deceased and then making a ghusl? That's a separate chapter of fiqh. It's Kitab al-Tahara, not Kitab al-Janaiz. Also, we have Salat al-Janaiz, Salat al-Janaza, the prayer. What do you do when you make the prayer of the Janaza? So, Kitab al-Janaiz is a comprehensive chapter of fiqh that deals with other chapters, other side issues, and it's very important. And it's also one of the chapters of fiqh, just like all of them, but especially this one that deals with heavy spirituality, because it's talking about a bitter reality that a lot of people are pleased to ignore, and that is death, and that it has to come to us all, and that it's mandatory for us to prepare for it the best way we know how. Bi-idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with that being said, the first section of the kitab, the author says, Al-Fasl al-Awwal, or it says here, Ahkam al-Muhtadar. It says the rulings of he who was about to die. The rulings of the one who's on his deathbed. The one who's really sick. The one who's about to check out, as they say. There are rulings, there are things that he must do, things that he should do, recommended, and there are things that those who are around him have to or should do. Obligatory and recommended. Just like there are other rulings which they cannot do and he cannot do. It's haram. Such as wrong someone with regards to inheritance, or give too much wealth in the will, or whatever the case may be. The author says, من السنة عيادة المريض وتلقين المحتضر الشهادتين وتوجيهه وتغميضه إذا مات وقراءة ياسين عليه والمبادرة بتجهيزه إلا لتجويز حياته والقضاء لدينه وتسجيته ويجوز تقبيله وعلى المريض أن يحسن الظن بربه ويتوب إليه ويتخلص من كل ما عليه. The author, very smooth, succinct, right to the point words. He says, from the sunnah is visiting the sick. That's a practice of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Something that he taught us to do as well, is to visit the sick and not to ignore the sick. The author says, وَتَلْقِينَ الْمُحْتَضَرَ الشَّهَادَتَيْنِ. Now, with regards to visiting the sick, what is the purpose of visiting the sick? First and foremost is, you can't even say first and foremost because it goes back and forth. It's beneficial to the one who's visiting and the one who's being visited. As far as the visitor, obviously, he grows in Iman. He becomes more aware and brought into direct contact with the reality that is forthcoming, that we conveniently choose to ignore, and that's death, sickness, and injury. It's a reality. It's going to happen, or we're going to die. Secondly, he's going to get the reward of visiting his ill Muslim brother. Thirdly, the one who's being visited, perhaps the visitor will remind him of Allah. Perhaps he'll regain his strength and overcome the sickness. He may beat the cancer. He may fight it because he's so happy and delighted that his brothers came to visit him. His family members didn't forget him. His favorite nephew, his favorite grandson, his favorite niece took time out of her day to visit a sick old man in the hospital. They may help him out, and they may remind him of what he has to do with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a benefit for both. Also, even deeper than that, it's a benefit for those who are in the hospital, or those who are in the house, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. You may visit some Muslims, you visit someone in the house, and they can ask you questions. They have problems now, what to do. Or they see the students of the Sheikh and see the Sunnah walking and talking, and they're reminded of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Or the non-Muslims in the household or in the hospital say, wow, this is what Islam is about? This guy, he's white, he's black, he looks like he comes from an Asian background. This one looks like he comes from the Indian subcontinent. But all of them are all in one place together, visiting somebody that they're not related to by blood. Islam means brotherhood. Islam is about people being diverse. It's not for a race or a color. This is serious. And none of these guys are related to him. And in his room right now, in his hospital room, not one of his family members is here. But all these other racially diverse guys are in the room. Wow. You don't think the non-Muslims see this? You don't think it has an effect upon them? And you go into the hospital room, and there may be 3 beds or 4 beds. And there's no one to visit any of them. But yet and still, there's so many Muslims that they have to limit the amount of visitors and the times because there's so many brothers that come and see the sick brother in the hospital. Wallahi, we've seen this with our own 2 eyes. We've seen the physicians, we've seen the doctors. They come up and ask us, who are you? Where do you come from? What do you study? One physician, he asked me. He was from Europe, visiting America. Top physician. He said, what science, what do you follow? He asked me, what do you study? Your dress, why are you so clean? He asked me this in the hospital, just like that. I never saw him a day in my life. So the point is that there's always an opportunity for da'wah. There's always an opportunity for representing and manifesting Islam. Khairan, inshallah. The author then says, وَتَلْقِينَ الْمُحْتَضَرِ الشَّهَادَتَيْن. It's also from the sunnah to make the ill Muslim to say the shahadatain. Get him to repeat after you. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, or la ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. Getting him to say it. And the people of knowledge, they say, this should be done with gentleness. It should not be forced and harassed to do it. And once he says it once, and he doesn't say anything else, then you should stop, leave him. If he starts talking about other things, then you ask him and you request him to say it again. And the wisdom behind this is for the last thing that he says to be la ilaha illallah, of course. Also, they say not to harass him and harry him, that way he won't become frustrated and upset and say something that he really doesn't mean, or out of frustration or anger, and then die upon an evil statement. Leave me alone, I don't want to say that again. Then his soul is taken. Okay? And that right there is applicable even to the dunya and the living people. Do not harass and badger the people unless the people may say something out of frustration and anger. Not because they really don't like Islam or they don't want to follow the sunnah, but you're just badgering them and harassing them and harrying them. There's tremendous wisdom. Just teach the people the sunnah, that's it. Present it to them, offer it to them, explain it. Make your books available, make your channel available, make your lectures available. That's it. Anyone that you can sit down and talk to personally, you sit down and you talk to them personally, hold them by the hand, and you explain it to them in detail. Anyone who's under your guardianship and your care, you enforce it, no doubt. And there are rules that be followed living in my household. You're my wife, you're my children. These are the rules. You don't have to be convinced. I've explained it to you, but you're going to follow it at least hourly in my house. And anyone that's not under your guardianship directly, who owns a grown person, and they want you to say, listen, just teach me everything. I want you to take all of my pants and I want you to get them trimmed for me. I want you to show me what I can and cannot do with my beard. I want you to look at all of my different estates and bank accounts, what's permissible, what's not, so on and so forth. That's one thing. But the average person is not going to be like that. So don't force them. Just teach them. Just offer it to them. And if they want to take it, alhamdulillah, and if they don't, then alhamdulillah. Moving forward, he says, with tawjihuhu, it's also from the sunnah to turn the deceased or the dying Muslim to the qibla. Get him to face the qibla. Some ulama say, place him on his right side and allow his head to be towards the qibla. Others may say, point the feet towards the qibla as if he's praying. What's important is that they say it's recommended for the Muslim to be towards the qibla before dying. Allah knows best. We're not going to mention the proof and the evidence for that. Right now, it says, وَتَغْمِيضُهُ إِذَا مَاتَ, and to close his eyes upon death. Once he dies, now close his eyes, don't allow his eyes to remain open. They say that when the soul is taken, as is mentioned in the hadith, and the ulama explain it, we're not mentioning the hadith right now, the eyes follow the soul out. So perhaps it may be an unsightly scene, the eyes actually seeing the spectacle and phenomena of death. So close the eyes. And it's out of respect and the means of the deceased Muslim resting. He then says, وَقِرَاتِ يَاسِينَ عَلَيْهِ. And it's also from the sunnah to recite Surah Yasin upon him. The author, the view that he takes is that it is authentic. Or if it's not authentic, it's something that's not haram and it's recommended. Some of the Sahaba may have done it, whatever the case may be. The author's view here is that that's from the sunnah to do it. What do the other ulama say about that? Is the hadith authentic? That's a long issue. The author, his respected opinion, is that it's from the sunnah to do it. He believes that it's from the authentic sunnah to do it. Is to recite Surah Yasin upon the deceased. Now, when is Surah Yasin to be recited? Is Surah Yasin to be recited upon he who is dying on his deathbed? Or is it to be recited upon one who has actually died? Is Surah Yasin to be recited in the house? Is it to be recited at the grave after burial? These are all problematic issues and oftentimes cannot be answered accurately. And this is proof of something being wrong with the issue, something being wrong with the hadith, when there are too many open-ended questions that can't be answered accurately said. Questions that can be answered but not accurately, scientifically. Therefore, some of the ulama, they say that if you're going to recite the surah, then it should be recited upon the muhtadar, he who was about to die, and not necessarily the one who's actually died. Obviously, the word mota, the hadith says, iqra'u ala mawtakum yasin. Read Yasin upon your dead. The word mota in the hadith can sometimes mean he who has actually died and he who was about to die. Other ulama, they say, rather after the person has deceased. As we can clearly see that the author was mentioning recommended acts of those who are around the muhtadar. And then after the muhtadar has passed, وَتَغْمِيضُهُ إِذَا مَاتَ, closing his eyes when he dies, then he mentioned وَقِرَأَةِ يَاسِينَ عَلَيْهِ, reciting Yasin upon him, meaning after he's died. خير inshallah. He then says, وَالْمُبَادَرَةُ بِتَجْهِيزِهِ إِلَّا لِتَجْوِيزِ حَيَاتِهِ. He says, and to rush forth and preparing his body. Obviously, one may say this is conjuncted after minas sunnah. From the sunnah is this, is that, and rushing to prepare his body. Is that what the author means? That it's from the sunnah? Does it mean that it's not obligatory? It's just recommended? The terminology of the word sunnah was important. It's from the deen, is to rush to prepare the body. Unless, he says, it's a possibility that he's still alive. We have to make sure that this person has actually died. He's unconscious. One has stopped breathing. One still has a pulse, so on and so forth. You have to make sure, have knowledge that the person has actually been declared dead. You have to be sure of that. You may start washing the body, and the person wakes up, says, oh, that water is cold. Don't touch me down there. This is reality. So you have to be careful. You need fiqh of what you're doing. Alhamdulillah, in the modern era, the knowledge, the science, the technology is advanced. So it may not be a problem like that. But even in the past, okay, there are many people, even to this day, in many third world countries, they don't have the technology, they don't have the computers and the different devices and the lasers and this and that, but have tremendous natural skill, tremendous talent and skill with regards to healing and curing people, and with regards to knowing and feeling death. They can touch the person, the pulse. They may be more accurate than the machine, okay, with regards to someone's heart. Allah Azza wa Jalla is the one who teaches the people, عَلَّمَ الْإِنسَانَ مَا لَمْ يَعْلَمْ. خَيْرًا inshallah. He then says here, وَالْقَضَاءُ لِدَيْنِهِ, and also to pay off his debts. Pay off his debts. The debts that were recorded and written down, asking the people, verifying the debts that weren't necessarily recorded or written down, to pay them off. وَتَسْجِيَتُهُ, and then wrap him up. Not the shroud, not the coffin, but to wrap him up. Allow his body to be covered. وَيَجُوزُ تَقْبِيلُهُ, he says, and it's also permissible to kiss him. He doesn't say it's recommended, but it's permissible to kiss the dead. Whether it's a husband and a wife, whether it's a brother, my friend, my teacher, my student, whatever the case may be, he says permissible to kiss the dead. Some of the issues that pertain to this is Can a non-mahram man kiss, or a non-mahram woman kiss a non-mahram man? Let's say, hypothetically, for example, it was a male teacher and a female student, and they were dear to each other. That's teacher and student relationship. And he died, and she visited him, the family, they knew that she was close to the teacher for years, and she came and she saw the body. Is that permissible? Can she kiss him? Moving forward, the author, he says, وَعَلَى الْمَرِيدِ أَنْ يُحْسِنَ الظَّنَّ بِرَبِّهِ. He says the deceased, or the one who is sick and is about to die, he must have good thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Husn al-dhann. The ulama of Islam, they say that there's no point in having a great deal of fear at this time, because there isn't any deed that he can avoid. There is no sin that he can fall into physically, obviously, on his deathbed. He can fall into a mental sin while he has a bit of thinking about Allah, so on and so forth. Okay, lying verbally, but physically, it's not so much he can do. So it only makes sense for him to have hope. It's it, khalas. You're about to die. There aren't but so many good deeds to perform anymore. If a person had a slave, he's on his deathbed, try to free a slave, give sadaqah, whatever the case may be, give advice, whatever he can, review knowledge, but it's not but so much he can do. So it only makes sense for him to now depend upon hope and to have good thoughts of Allah and His promise, and Allah will keep His promise of being merciful and kind to His slaves and forgiving His slaves and overlooking the faults of His slaves. And not to think that Allah will break His promise, and to think that he's going to go and burn in hell and Allah is not going to be merciful to him. Obviously, there's a balance in that as well. He then says, last but not least, وَيَتَخَلَّصَ مِنْ كُلِّ مَا عَلَيْهِ. And it's also upon the one who is about to die to free himself from everything which is upon him, meaning rights and responsibilities. Oh, I owe this person money. I never returned this book to the library. I slapped my wife. I beat this guy up. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Have mercy upon me. So on and so forth. Return this, please. I owe this person that. I backbit this person. To get free from all of the different rights, responsibilities, acts of oppression, whatever, before it's too late. Obviously, he should have done these things when he was alive, when he was healthy and walking and talking. But man will be man. Man will be man. So at least at the time of severe illness, at least at the time in which he's sweating tremendously, fever is strong, and those who are around him are saying that he is about to die. Khairan, inshallah. Then the author, rahimahullah, he goes on to say, الفصل الثاني غسل الميت. يجب غسل الميت المسلم على الأحياء والقريب أولى بالقريب إذا كان من جنسه وأحد الزوجين بالآخر ويكون الغسل 3 أو 5 أو أكثر بماء وسدر وفي الأخيرة كافور وتقدم الميامن ولا يغسل الشهيد. Then the author speaks upon washing the deceased. He's passed. The ahkam of the muhtadar, the eyes, the qibla, that's all going down. He's actually officially declared dead. What do we have to do now? The author says, those who are alive must wash the deceased Muslim. He didn't say non-Muslim, but he said Muslim. He has to wash, they have to wash him or her. It's obligatory, according to the author. Then says, and this goes to show us, before we move forward, the importance of purity and cleanliness in Islam. Spiritual, physical, mental, and just always being in a clean state when it comes to standing in front of Allah, sitting in front of Allah, returning to Allah, respecting Allah. Purity is paramount in the deen. He says here, وَالْقَرِيبُ أَوْلَى بِالْقَرِيبِ إِذَا كَانَ مِنْ جِنْسِهِ. If one is a relative or family member, then they have the most right to wash the body as long as they are of the same sex. It's my brother who died. I have the most right to wash him before some sheikh or some other person or this one or that one. It's my brother, my blood brother. Obviously, with the conditions of a person knowing how to wash properly, a person being ameen, trustworthy, and not to reveal the secrets of the deceased Muslim, what his face looked like, his hands were cringed up, he was awfully terrified. Also, the concept of a person having the necessary composure of seeing the spectacle of death may be hard to see someone that was your father, your brother, and now he's ice cold, laying flat on a steel bed. It's not an easy thing. In the list of the necessary conditions. And if he can't do it all by himself, with the assistance, in most cases, people, they do it, they have assistants now, and people that can lead them and steer them in the proper direction. Tayyib. He then says here, وَأَحْدُ الزَّوْجَيْنِ بِالْآخَرِ. And the husband and the wife have most right to wash each other. A wife dies, a husband can wash his wife, vice versa. And this once more shows us the intimate relationship between husband and wife. And there's always some type of closeness and care. I looked after you when you were alive. I'm looking after you have passed. I cared for you when you were alive. I care for you after you have gone. It's a deep concept. As if one can say some type of spiritual romance. Spiritual romance. The last thing that I can do for you in this dunya. SubhanAllah. It's no more. You've left. You've gone. Allah is taking your soul. The least I can do is look after you to the best of my ability. And it's the last time I'm going to physically see you in this dunya. It's deep. Obviously, with the conditions that we mentioned before as well. The conditions that we've mentioned before as well, that the spouse has the necessary knowledge, has the necessary amana, has the necessary composure. Moving forward. وَيَكُونُ الْغَسْلُ ثَلَاثًا أَوْ خَمْسًا أَوْ أَكْثَرَ. And the washing, it can be done 3 times, 5 times, or more than that. However many times a person has to wash the body is for one reason or another, for the body to be clean and fresh. There was a murder, an accident. Now, a bad accident is blood, a nasty gash, a wound. They slice his chest open, his skull open for an autopsy. Only Allah knows the different janazas that we have done and seen. People being stabbed to death, people being shot to death. Okay, just imagine a vicious knife fight in which there's gashes in his head. And this part of flesh and meat is missing, this hole. An autopsy. And they literally slice and dice the body, cut it open, and screw it back together. Or a brother that was, got shot up while he was in the streets, living the street life. Or an innocent person, supposedly, and got hit in crossfire. And there are 3 or 4 or 7 bullets riddled through his body. It's a lot of blood, a lot of stuffing. So oftentimes you have to wash it more. Or, and this is obviously something that in most cases this is going to be dealt with in the Muslim minority communities in the Western countries, in the UK, in America, in which there's gang violence, drugs, these different things, in which there's a lot of gun violence, unfortunately. He says here, or before we go further, one may say a person just wants to do the recommended washing more than once. That's fine as well, a thorough cleaning or cleansing. He says, bima'in wa sidrin. He says what? With water and with the leaves of the lote tree. With water and with the leaves of the lote tree. In other words, today, any type of soap or shampoo that's going to be clean and fresh. That's going to be clean and fresh. وفي الأخيرة كافور. And in the last washing, camphor. Obviously, camphor has a very strong and stout aroma. It has a very robust cleaning agent. It has the ability to tighten the skin and keep it from being slack and laxed. Now, the author here, he doesn't mention about wudu. He doesn't mention about saying Bismillah, starting with the hand. He doesn't say anything about that. He just says ghusl. Whether that means just a sheer washing, or whether it's well known or presupposed to be well known with regards to the recommended act of ghusl and how to wash the ghusl. Here in this beginner's book, the author did not mention the details of the recommended ghusl. Rather, he mentioned that which is obligatory. So, it's only mandatory. That which is mandatory is to wash the body, just like someone who's alive. You don't have to wash it with right, left, nose. You don't just wash the body with the intention. Here, the only thing that's mandatory is to wash the body. The specific details, the recommended acts, can be found in another book. Another issue is, if a person died and they were junub, do they have to be washed twice, or is it just enough to be washed once? The author, he says here, وَتُقَدَّمُ الْمَيَامِنِ. He says, and the right sides should be washed first. It's a recommended act of ghusl that the author mentioned, without the other details as we just explained. Not necessarily mandatory, but recommended. وَلَا يُغَسَّلُ الشَّهِيدِ. And the martyr is not to be washed. The martyr, he who dies, fi sabilillah, isn't to be washed. He who's on the battlefield fighting the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to be buried in his natural blood and his natural clothes. And we all know what the Messenger of Allah said about the Day of Judgment, when he will be raised and resurrected, what the blood will look like, what the blood will smell like. The virtue of the lions, one who's a lion in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having no fear, giving up his life to support and propagate the religion of Al-Islam. So that's the end of that chapter, or that section. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. We ask him for true fiqh of the deen, firmness upon it. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.